And good morning, my beautiful America, my shining city on a hill. I'm Eden Gordon Hill, and welcome to the All American Book Club. You guys, let's get to it. We have a very powerful author that is joining us this morning. If Walls Could Talk, it is by Sandee Jo Crocker with New York Times bestselling author Ken Abraham. You guys know Ken, he's been on the show a couple times now. And Sandee Jo is going to be talking about, as she is a survivor of domestic abuse. She endured years of fear and uncertainty. And she's going to talk about her story of survival, resilience, and ultimately hope. And one thing I want to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, this month is very important, especially to Sandee's story. So she's going to be sharing with us the domestic abuse aspect of this month and really coming together to surround, hey, grab your pit crew and surround the women and men in your lives who may be struggling silently. So if you all would please help me welcome Sandee Jo to the show. Thank you so much for joining this morning.
Thank you, Eden. Thank you so much for having me. And, just that you have an interest in my story and getting the word out there and bringing awareness to domestic violence.
Oh, absolutely. So where to begin? Where would you like to talk about If Walls Could Talk? What really brought you to the point to sit down and write your story with Ken? How did that happen?
Well, for years, I had been told by friends and family and just so many people, even strangers who happened to hear my story on a plane or a train, that, wow, you should really write a book. But I knew that through the pain and the horrific memories, the trauma, I knew that I would have to relive all that and that that was something I was not going to do. And so for years, I just always said, yeah, that's nice. And I would smile and, like we do, but I never intended to ever write a book
Mm.
until the day finally happened when I felt like the Holy Spirit, like God himself said, you need to tell your story. And that's when everything kind of changed because, we can say no to a lot of people. I can even tell my husband no because he was like the loudest voice in my ear saying, you really need to write a book. My current husband, I should
Right,
say.
right.
Um, but then when it's like I felt like the Holy Spirit was speaking and saying, you need to tell your story, that shifted my thinking and that's where it kind of began for me. And then I put pen to paper myself for like 3 years and I just started writing my story, really not knowing how the process goes.
Mhm.
And then just because of God's goodness, we were able to meet Ken Abraham. And he brought he brought all, as I say in my book, he brought all my tangled words and my memories that I just, I put out on in this like very manuscript that I really didn't know what I was doing. And he took that and he turned it into um, what I feel like is a powerful story and something that can actually help,
Mhm.
beyond my pain. I look at it as, yes, we went through years of pain. When I say we, I mean me and my children. Um, and for years, I just wanted to stuff it and move on and not think about it. And then I realized this is not doing good. This is no good for anyone, and
Mhm.
especially me. But if I can't share this story and have the opportunity for other women, especially other women, um, to gain something from it and say, hey, she missed those red flags, but maybe I don't have to. Let me
Mhm.
learn from someone who's been down that road.
Mhm. Well, can you share a bit about your personal journey? I don't want to go into too much of I don't want to bring up bad memories for you, but what I want to be able to share with our audience is some of those triggers that if they are going through something like this, that they need to they need to be discerning towards those triggers and what they can do to combat the abuse.
Well, and I really like that question because uh, at, we just, especially women, we get in relationships and
Yeah.
we're led, by our heart, and
Yeah.
we maybe we don't see what we should, or even if it's something minor, but we should be paying attention to who we're paying attention to because those little things turn out to be bigger things.
Right.
And, for instance, if there's extreme control, jealousy, change. Does he want you to change the way you dress, the people you
Right.
hang out with? Does he become irritated if you don't return his text or phone calls right away? Just the things like that that we might overlook, but then in the end they become a problem. And
Hmm.
I do talk about that a little bit in my book, the red flags that I missed. And if you want me to, I'll just go ahead and start with
Sure.
my story and kind of do an overview.
Absolutely.
So I married the preacher's son when I was 18 years old. We had dated for 2 years. So we started dating when I was 16 years old, and he was wonderful and good looking, funny, just, charming, really. And for 2 years we dated, and I never saw any type of red flag that would say, "Oh my goodness, he could be a terrible person." Now looking back, I do see that he was toward the end of our dating, and we're right about the time when we were almost married. He started kind of putting some control into our relationship, which was, saying that I shouldn't be wearing the jeans and the clothing that I'm wearing. I should be wearing more like skirts and dresses. I should have seen that as a red flag, but I didn't. And
Right.
then he wanted me to pull back from some of my hobbies, and one specifically was dancing. I took dance classes all my life, and he was like, "Well, you shouldn't be dancing with other guys. I just want you dancing with me." And I just thought that was so romantic, Oh my goodness, he only wants me to dance with him. But I was young, and
Right.
so
Yeah.
those are just two examples of what I missed.
Yeah.
So when I turned 18, a week later, we were married, and we started this wonderful life that I assumed would be a wonderful life. And we went
Yeah.
on our honeymoon. The day we returned from our honeymoon was the first time he had ever put his hands on me. Um, he he just like turned from this wonderful person into out of the blue this, well, he wasn't quite a monster yet, that came, but he became aggressive with me, and I'd never seen that. So that was like I was so startled and so confused, but I forgave him, and that was the first time that I had ever seen that side of him. And then moving on for 18 and a half years, it only progressively got worse. um, in the beginning, I thought, well, I'll just leave him if he does this again. But then
Right.
when the babies started coming, that's when things really intensified, because now he had so much more control over me, because it
Was
was now,
was it verbal and physical abuse, or was it was a combo? It was a
yeah,
combo.
it was everything. Yeah. It was verbal, it was um, mental, it was physical, it was sexual abuse. It was, you could check every box. Um, and it was over time that all the other, um, like with the financial abuse, where I couldn't spend my own money, that came in time. In the beginning, it wasn't necessarily there, but after 18 years, it was definitely there.
So it was a
Um,
control piece as well. The manipulation, the control, the mind games, all of those
yes.
things. Did you find early on when the first abuse episode happened, did you share with anybody? Did you feel safe enough to share with your parents, his parents? Like, how did you approach? Were you able to? Did you have a tribe, a pit crew of people around you that you felt like I can share this with them and they're not going to retaliate? I mean, what did you do?
I didn't. I really didn't. And that's one thing that I say in my message when I'm speaking with, I'm with an organization called Safe Space. And when I have the opportunity to share my story in that setting, I do say, you have to tell someone, because
Mhm.
part of the control, the secrecy is part of the control.
Right.
Keeping that dark, deep secret just controls you. So, but that's one of the messages I say, you have to find somebody and tell them.
Mhm.
Besides the fact that you need to reach out for help, maybe even to a domestic violence hotline, you have to share this with somebody. Don't hold it in. I did not. I didn't share it with anyone. I didn't share it with a friend. I didn't share it with my mom. I didn't share it with
Mm.
one of his family members. I just didn't. And part of that was because he continued to tell me that it was my fault. And it sounds really bizarre to think, well, how could I heap all of that on myself? Well, I did. And he would always point back to my family and say, well, look at what you come from. You know, you have so many people in your family who are divorced. This is you bringing your baggage into our marriage. So every argument, every fight, he would always turn it on me and say, this is your fault. You brought this into our marriage. I don't have one person in my family who's ever been divorced. And, you
Mhm.
know, as a young girl, I guess I was
Yeah.
just naive enough to believe it. And I did.
What was the turning point for you and your children? What was that breaking point?
So just after years of horrendous abuse, and when I say this abuse, I mean guns, knives, um,
Mm.
being trapped in a speeding car, killing animals in front of us for us to for punishment, um, and then of course just his physical hands. That's the kind of abuse that we all endured. And then on March 21st, 2008, our oldest son, who was 17 at the time, shot and killed his dad to protect himself and the rest of the family. And, you know, that was the best day of my life because I felt like there was no way out. And especially on that day, we had had so many terrible days and so many violent days, but there was something different about this day. I knew that somebody was going to die. And I knew that it wasn't going to be my son. It would be over my dead body, you know, if it was my son. So I just did everything in my power to keep the two of them separated. But
Right.
of course, they both, you know, they overpowered me. My husband overpowered me, and it just went on into a vicious battle that lasted a couple of hours throughout the morning and afternoon.
So when this happened, and how do I ask this without, was it almost a release for you knowing that what had just happened, you knew something was going to happen. And now, if you will, your attacker, your perpetrator, your abuser was now gone. What was the next turning point for you and your family as you were going, I guess, in the healing process?
Mhm.
How long did it take for you guys to find the healing, find the redemption, find the, just finding all of those things that God truly promises us? How
Mhm.
what was that like?
For me, it was years. It really was. In the beginning, when you know, I learned that my husband was dead uh, through my son, it was very hard for my mind to process that because I just always saw him as larger than life and bigger than a bullet. You know, he would turn into this superhuman person. And so
Yeah.
when he told me that he shot his dad, that he said, "Mom, Dad's dead," I just couldn't process it. So immediately, when you asked me that question, my immediate response was, "Well, that can't be true." And then when I discovered that it was true, there was overwhelming relief because this particular battle had gone on for so long that day, not to mention all the battles throughout the 18 and a half years. So there was great relief, but that was short-lived because then my son was now the person who we were obviously at the police station by then, and now my son, he was facing first-degree murder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that turned into now I'm worried about my son.
Right.
So
Right.
for approximately 2 months, I lived in so unsettled and unsure of what his future would be.
Mhm.
God just brought us through that time, and he gave me so much peace, and he's been so good to my son and my family, my kids. But to answer your question, I think that it has taken literally years for us to heal. And you know, individually, my children, my adult children as well, we've all kind of had to do it on our own, and we've had to take our own journey through this. It's not something I can't heal for them. I wish I could,
Yeah.
but it's something that they've had to do on an individual basis. And
Mhm.
but God is good, and He has
Yes.
brought us through so many hard times, through so many difficult times, and I'm just blessed every day that I wake up.
What do you say? Well, let me ask you two questions. We're heading into the last part of this segment. And I want to make sure we get a couple more things in here. Did any of your family or your friends say to you years later, we saw something, but we were afraid to say something as you were going through that time?
No, no, because the isolation. Now, friends,
Mhm.
yes. I'm sorry, I don't know if you said friends, but
Yeah.
family, no. Friends, yes. I did have a friend come to me that I went to church with, and she later said, "I knew that something wasn't right, but I just couldn't put my finger on it."
Mm,
And then, there were some other general statements made by a few people
mhm.
that knew me. And then since the book, I've been getting a lot of messages and a lot of text.
Yeah.
A lot of people find me on, social media, and so I get messages, and they all kind of say the same thing. I should have known something just seemed a little different, and you were so quiet, and I get a lot of those messages.
So, what do you say um, to those who are going through abuses, who are afraid to say anything, who are, it's kind of like the scenario of if you say something, I'll kill you. If you say something, I'll kill your loved ones, those kinds of things. What do you say to people as you are, counseling those who have been going through it? What's the top three things that you would say to this audience of those who may be young women on Capitol Hill in a really bad relationship, or a young spouse? I hate to say it, but in the military, the abuse, domestic abuse, is very high.
Mhm.
And having, I live in a military community, and I'm always kind of looking out in that sense. And I don't want to be negative on military. My husband and I have served this nation. We love this nation. We'll do anything to help our military and our families, but we also need to be aware of these triggers and these red flags. So what would you say be the top three things that you tell people?
Well, speaking to other women,
Mhm.
especially,
Mhm.
I would tell them, "You're not alone," because I felt like I was alone through this whole ordeal. For all those years, I thought I was the only one going through it. As bizarre as that sounds, I was so isolated, and I thought I was the only one going through this. So I
Mhm.
would first of all want them to know they're not alone. And secondly, I would say you need to find somebody and tell them. You
Mhm.
need to end the secrecy. You need to find somebody that you feel comfortable with, and share that.
Mhm.
And then thirdly, you have to take measures to get out. You
Mhm.
have to find that, you have to find that strength. You have to get the courage to make the phone call, even if it's to a domestic violence hotline where they can get you the help that you need. But you have to separate yourself from your abuser, because one day it's going to be too late.
Mhm.
And my loud and clear message is you have to get out, but you have to do it safely. And
Mhm.
there are ways, none of this is risk free. Okay.
Right,
When
right,
you leave,
exactly.
that is a very dangerous time, but it's also very dangerous to stay.
Mhm.
So
It
you're at
is.
risk both ways. And the fact of the matter is I stayed in this relationship thinking that I was protecting myself and my family. And looking back, there were so many years I wish that I would have just risked it all and took my kids and just, ran. But I
Mhm.
didn't know that there were organizations that were there to help.
In our final 30 seconds left, could you share the organization that you're working with and where people could connect with you if your story is resonating with them or somebody that they know? How can they seek out help?
Right. So I work with an organization called Safe Space, and we're out of Martin County, Florida. We have
Mhm.
two shelters, and besides having the shelter, we have 24-hour hotline. We have services once the women, come to our shelter. We have mental health counseling, we have legal services, we have just resources to help them get connected with what it is that they need. We
Mhm,
even go to court with them. Just
mhm.
and none of these services there's no charge. It's completely free, and they can find a center like this, an organization like this in their area if they call the National Domestic Hotline,
Okay.
and they can put them in touch with somebody that's close to them because somebody might be listening that's not in my neighborhood or in
Right,
Martin
right.
County.
So the National Domestic Hotline then for having
Yeah,
them call that. Okay, wonderful.
yes.
Well, Sandy Jo, I am so thankful for your powerful book, If Walls Could Talk. I know it just came out and with Ken Abraham, and we're so thankful for your service to this nation. And we're thankful for you using your voice to stand up for those who right now probably feel very voiceless. And so you are activating, you're being bold, you're being strong, you're being courageous. And we are so grateful for what you are doing to fight domestic abuse. And for all of those who are tuning in here at the All American Book Club, we're so thankful that you joined us this morning. And please stay tuned for our final segment. We'll be right back.